I'm going to have to read because I can't really say anything in 10 minutes or less if I don't read. When I was first asked to participate in this conference, I said no because I didn't take the topic of the conference seriously. I was aware that Richard Dawkins and other so-called new atheists, or as they like to call themselves, brights, made a lot of noise about what they call the jealous, petty, spiteful, arbitrary, homophobic, misogynistic, genocidal, infanticidal, maniacal. Oh, you didn't let me get to the end. Infanticidal, maniacal, but otherwise likable God of the Old Testament. Actually, they don't say the otherwise likable part. I added that. It always seemed to me, however, that the Brights were just attacking a straw man. Granted, there actually are people who believe both that the Bible is inerrant and that it should always be taken literally, but there are also people who believe in alien abductions. Why should a humble agnostic like me, or as I like to call myself, a brilliant, why should I get involved in a debate between anti-religious apologists and religious fundamentalists, especially since I'm not a Bible scholar and so would be out of my depth anyways? Well, Mike the Bergman, however, doesn't take no easily for an answer, so fearful of the entire My Kids' wrath, I finally agreed to comment on Eleanor Stump's paper and also to participate in this final panel session. Now that the conference is coming to a close, I have to say that I really wish I had stuck to my original no answer. Just kidding, just kidding. I'm actually really glad that Mike Bergman talked me into this. I now recognize that the issues here go much deeper and are much more nuanced and subtle and interesting than I imagined. More importantly, it isn't only the fundamentalists on either side that have a stake in this, and while the danger of substituting apologetics for genuine inquiry is real, it is clearly, given this conference, not unavoidable. Yet while I do believe that I understand the game better now, I have several new questions about the rules, or at least about the way the game was played in this conference. Specifically, I've identified 4 assumptions that were not discussed at this conference, even though they are hidden, except the last one's not hidden, but even though they are hidden beneath the surface of some of the papers presented in the past 3 days. I find all 4 assumptions to be highly questionable. I don't believe that they're false yet, but they're definitely questionable, and so I'm inclined to think that they deserve more attention, though obviously not every issue can be addressed in a single conference. Perhaps a sequel to this conference is needed. It could be called My Ways Are Not Your Ways Too, The Bright Strike Back, or something like that. I will begin by stating all 4 assumptions, and then I will say a few words, just a few words about each of them. Any insights about these assumptions that the rest of you have that would like to share with me either today or later by email would be greatly appreciated. First, some papers assume that ancient people were very different from us psychologically, and in particular that they were a hell of a lot tougher than us, though not necessarily in a good way. Second, it was assumed that a whole people can be hopelessly corrupt. Third, almost everyone seemed to assume that the only thing that a God might want to reveal through Scripture is the truth of certain propositions. And fourth, the assumption that if God is our creator, then our life comes as a temporary gift from him. To understand the first of these 4 assumptions, imagine being commanded by God to use primitive weapons to kill other human beings, including defenseless children. Most of us would find this impossibly frightening, even if we were absolutely sure that no physical harm would come to us. And if we somehow managed to obey this command, imagine the psychological effects of doing so, of hacking into human tissue, of crushing a human being's skull while looking into that person's eyes, of slaughtering defenseless children when our strongest instinct is to protect them. Modern warfare is almost always less horrifying than this, and yet it is horrifying enough to cause severe psychological damage to a significant portion of soldiers. Are we to suppose that because savagery was the rule in ancient times, ancient warfare was for that reason significantly less damaging psychologically? The assumption that ancient people were that much different from us psychologically is highly questionable. It is doubtful that a few thousand years of human evolution, whether biological or cultural, has changed human beings that much. Yet this assumption does seem to operate beneath the surface of some of the papers at this conference. For example, while Eleanor Stump addressed the possible moral corruption of the Israelite soldiers, she, for the most part, ignored the question of why God commands, notice not just allows but commands, Israelite soldiers to perform acts that, whether or not they are morally permissible, are so horrific and so contrary to natural virtue that their performance must have caused severe psychological damage to many of these soldiers, unless, of course, the ancient psyche was very unlike our own. It seems to me that we have here a uniquely biblical problem of evil that was not addressed in this conference. Another example, Peter Van Inwagen suggested that, according to the common morality in ancient times, killing all of the people of a land one invades would be a no-brainer. That's a paraphrase. But I doubt this, or I'm not sure that's right. I mean, if that were so, why does God tell the Israelites not to make a covenant with the other people and to show them no mercy? A second questionable assumption is that if a nation or people is corrupt, then it's supposed to follow that all of its members could either deserve to be killed or be benefited by being killed, or maybe deserve to have at least their land taken away. I'm wondering if that assumption is realistic. In any large group of people, there's always a great deal of variety, a combination of aggressive and gentle, tolerant and intolerant, kind and cruel, honest and deceitful. This is why non-combatants are not to be targeted, even if the political unit to which they belong is corrupt. Given such variety, is it realistic to suppose that in the pursuit of goals like just punishment or protecting Israel from apostasy, it might be necessary for God to command something like genocide? I doubt it. Skip that one. A third questionable assumption is that the only thing revealed by Scripture, if Scripture is revelation, is the truth of certain propositions. The famous Lutheran philosophical theologian who Howard Wetstein just mentioned, Rudolf Otto, implicitly rejected this assumption. He thought that many of the apparently problematic passages in Scripture, including passages involving God's wrath, should not be taken literally because they are not intended to reveal the truth of any propositions. Instead, they are intended to express or evoke certain religious experiences, especially experiences of what Otto called God's numinous qualities, including God's majesty, awfulness, and urgency. According to Otto, these qualities have no analogy to human personality and are known only by direct acquaintance. Otto thought that attempting to reconcile God's wrath, taken literally as described in the Bible, with God's goodness, by saying something like righteous indignation or something. I remember my Baptist preachers saying that. He thought that was just hopeless. I think he was right about this. But my main point here is that neither Otto's approach to problematic passages in the Bible, nor any approach even remotely resembling Otto's approach, was discussed in this conference. I wonder, I'm not sure about this, if a needlessly narrow view of the object of revelation is the underlying reason for this omission. Finally, a fourth assumption, defended explicitly by Richard Swinburne, is that if God is our creator, then our life comes as a temporary gift from him, and so God has a right to take back that gift whenever he wants. I think this is a serious non sequitur. I mean, if I were to make an android from scratch, even maybe the matter I use is I'm able to make from nothing. I don't think that matters. And give that, and 1 minute, perfect. And give that android a teleology so that there's a sense, we can make sense of saying that what it is for that android to flourish. Then surely I can't say to the android, oh, well, you never had a chance to flourish. You've only lived a very, very short time, but your life was a gift from me, and so I have a right to take it back from you now. I don't think that's true for me and the android any more than it's true for God just because he's our creator. It doesn't mean we're his slaves.